Alex, thank you very much. So as Alex says, my name is Neil Usborne. I'm the project manager for this project, Renewing the Covenant in the Capital. This project is in place to improve the understanding and delivery of the Armed Forces Covenant by local authorities across the capital. So I'll give you some background. Why does this project exist, and what are the needs that led to its development? Well, a number of changes have occurred over the past few years, and some research has been conducted that's led to gaps or potential areas of need. So the Armed Forces Covenant was signed by all local authorities across the country, 407 of them between 2011 and 2013. But since then, there have been some developments and changes. So originally, it was the Armed Forces Community Covenant, the Corporate Covenant. They've now been brought together as one just single Armed Forces Covenant. There was a realisation that actually we weren't treating councils as employers, just as service providers, but we now realise that they do both in quite a big way, and we need to make sure they understand what that means. There were a number of studies that show that there's a really varied level of understanding or knowledge of the Armed Forces community by customer-facing staff. Executives, management, councillors within the council all understand the need to support this community and what the Armed Forces Covenant represents, but it isn't always filtered down through the workforce to the staff that may actually come into contact with them on a day-to-day basis. Although policies have mostly been altered by local authorities to account for the armed forces, it can be very difficult to find that information, not only for the community, but for council staff themselves. Any changes must be accessible. Some of the Armed Forces community themselves don't understand the Armed Forces Covenant, and this can lead to unrealistic expectations or conflict when dealing with councils. So it's just widening that knowledge and awareness. And then finally there's a really high turnover of Armed Forces Covenant champions within councils, because the role is a very small part of a much wider role, and there's little guidance as to what the role should be or where it should sit structurally. And due to this, sometimes the focus has been lost or the role has been lost completely. And with these reasons for doing something, putting together a project to address gaps, what is it that we're specifically looking to achieve? Firstly, that all councils in London have adjusted their policies to account for the Armed Forces Covenant obligations that they've made. So really there we're looking at housing, health, education, employment and HR. We want that all councils, in respect to the Armed Forces, policies in respect to the Armed Forces are readily accessible by both customers and staff. And that should be achieved by a dedicated Armed Forces webpage on the main council website to guide staff and provide support to the community as well. We want all council frontline staff to be aware of the Armed Forces Covenant, any issues that might be faced by members of the Armed Forces community, make sure that they're aware and trained in the application of policies and are able to signpost those in need directly to relevant support. And 2 levels of training have been developed, details of which I'll cover shortly. We want to make sure that there's clear objectives for those Armed Forces champions for use by councils, and that there's a network for those Armed Forces champions, the military units and service providers, so we can share best practice. And that's exactly what this forum is doing. We want all councils to have in place a formal covenant partnership with relevant stakeholders to be able to discuss borough-specific issues and events. And that London boroughs are acknowledged through a graduated bronze, silver and gold recognition scheme, which is called the Defence Employer Recognition Scheme. Again, details of that will be given shortly by one of our colleagues from the Reserve Forces and Cadets Association. And as a final bonus outcome, we as a project are here to facilitate any Armed Forces Covenant re-signings by councils. If any of you wish to publicly restate your commitment to the Armed Forces community, 4 boroughs have already done so since the end of 2018, and we're looking forward to more doing so over the coming year. So the first thing to do when we were setting out this project was for us to understand the landscape. Where are the military in London? Where's the wider Armed Forces community? And how can we get that information across to the people that need to know? So as you can see, this is a general footprint of London boroughs, and this is a dynamic map which is always going to be changing depending on where units move and change, but it gives an understanding of how widespread the military is across the capital. So the dark grey boroughs are boroughs with regular units, light grey are those with reserve units, pink have both, and if you can see, some have a dotted shading, they're the ones that have service family accommodation or married quarters. The military in London is predominantly army focused, but you can see across here there are flags denoting the Royal Naval presence in both Tower Hamlets and Wandsworth with the Royal Marine Reserve, and Royal Air Force presence, which is obviously a big one in Hillingdon. The biggest point to take here is that there are only 5 boroughs that don't have a military unit in them, so it's very widespread. One of our aims was to take all of the wide-ranging information that's available for the London boroughs from a variety of sources, but pull it all together into a usable format to give each area a good picture of what they're looking at. So the information out there is out there for everything from veteran estimates, numbers of service pupils, pensioners, military units, cadets, service family accommodation and more. But unless you know exactly where to look for it, it can be quite hard to find, and it's all coming from various sources. So that's why we've created a military footprint for each borough, which are open and available for everyone to use, and that makes up a big part of our training package. So this is an overview of the borough we're in today, Lambeth, a good range of armed forces community, and a couple of military units. I'll show you another couple. This is Westminster, an obvious military presence to most who pass through the city due to the ceremonial side of the army in London, but also home to veterans, families, children attending schools. It's those ones that we don't necessarily think about. And then finally, what's very useful is to see those boroughs that don't actually have a military unit inside their borders. There's 5 boroughs in that category, as I said, and here's Sutton, and you can see that even though there's not a unit, there's still an armed forces community, which is an important message to get across to staff who deal with those residents daily and may come across the armed forces community without actually realising it. Which moves us nicely onto our training packages. How do we get that information that we've seen down to frontline staff, busy dealing with resident issues on a day-to-day basis? Well, this is an example of what we're looking to deliver throughout London to all of the borough councils. We're funded by the Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust, so all of our training delivery is free of charge and without any other further interest than to promote the welfare and well-being of the service community. 2 levels of training have been developed. We start off with the Armed Forces Champions training. That's our senior level training, and it's designed to strengthen the understanding of the Armed Forces Covenant and the role of an Armed Forces Champion. Covers the differences in service life, any issues that may be faced by the community. We'll cover borough-specific military footprint and the community needs specific to that borough. We'll cover best practice nationwide of any policy changes and how to deliver commitment in the community. And of course, a lot of signposting to support pathways and support that's out there for people. Then we've got the customer-facing staff training, slightly slimmed down, around an hour and a half long, just to make sure that people aren't taken away from their work for too long. That's always a challenge. That really just focuses in on who the armed forces community are, borough-specific military issues, a basic awareness of the Armed Forces Covenant, but an understanding of service life and what issues people might be facing. And then we move on to identifying the community and effective signposting to either internal or external services and military charities. So we've already run training sessions with 6 London Borough Councils to over 150 staff, with hundreds more staff now booked in for training this year in 2020. But we still have the scope and the opportunity to take on more sessions with the remaining councils across London. The feedback has been great so far, with staff learning new information and agreeing that it's relevant for their job roles. And we're keen to spread that message as far and wide as we can through all of your organisations. On top of these face-to-face training sessions, we've developed an e-learning package to promote awareness of the armed forces, which will enable a wider rollout among the organisation and for future sustainability of the knowledge. This package can be tailored specifically for each council to make sure it's relevant for any staff that are undertaking it, with local information, local contacts. Again, already rolled out in a number of councils, this free-to-adopt package is there to be taken on board across London, and I would encourage any of the local authorities that are here today that are yet to adopt this to get in touch, and we can look at how we can work together in the whole training sector. So supplementing this training is the signposting and support information for organisations across London. So by now, we know who the armed forces community are and what issues they may need support with. But the big question at the end of the training is, how can we provide that support? Well, support pathways, as you can see here, have been developed for us by the NHS Armed Forces Network, and they give details of support available to the Armed Forces community across London. So we've done this area specific. And this details in a number of different support areas how support can be accessed, be that through statutory pathways or through the third sector. So what's the benefit for the Armed Forces community or unit welfare services using these? Well, they can search for support themselves rather than relying on others telling them where to go. And what's the benefit for local authorities using these? Well, it supports council staff by providing other options and assisting in relieving the burden on council service provision. So these pathways are open to all and available to the whole Armed Forces community themselves, any service providers that come into contact with the Armed Forces community, and they've been developed covering a huge breadth of need. So we cover mental health, physical health, addictions, social care, housing, employment, criminal justice, carers and families, children and adolescent, Gurkha and Nepalese, and adult education and training. So really a broad range of issues that may be faced. The benefit of these support pathways is to relieve some of the burden on the local councils. If this community could be helped and directed to support services at the earlier stage, i.e. caseworkers, contact centre, just on the website, then hopefully that will reduce waiting times, reduce potential issues, and reduce the support actually required from the council. Clearly, this information needs to be available to all in the most user-friendly, easy-to-access format, which multiple sheets of printed A4 paper, I appreciate, may not be the most user-friendly. So for that reason, a mobile app has been developed, which is free to download, and I would highly encourage you all to download this if you haven't already. And if you're working in a local authority or military unit, welfare centre, certainly encourage your staff to do the same. So the app is called Forces Connect, and we've heard a lot about various mobile apps today. This one's called Forces Connect, and it's designed to take users from the initial location selection. In our case, London is broken down into 5 regions just for ease of finding local services, take you all the way through to contact details for various support services just within 4 clicks. Very easy to use, very helpful, so please do download it now, either Apple, Android, it's free of charge, and see how it could benefit you and the wider Armed Forces community. It's now had 10,000 downloads, and all the information on here, which is uploaded by the NHS Armed Forces networks, is shared across to the Veterans Gateway and their map of need that was being talked about earlier. So from that sense, there's no duplication of effort. We're not putting more effort into it when they're doing the same thing. So it all feeds into that one central system. We've all got the same end goal. And in an attempt to tie all of these elements together and provide a good example of easily accessible information, we've worked closely with London councils, who are the apolitical organisation working on behalf of all of London's local authorities, to develop and deliver a webpage hosting the information that I've already shown you, from military footprints for each borough, access to the NHS support pathways, downloadable toolkits, support and advice for councils. Again, I would highly encourage you to visit the website, save it to your bookmarks, use the information and all the free resources available there. And it can be found either at londoncouncils.gov.uk/armed forces or londoncovenant.co.uk. In terms of the project as a whole, as you can see from this map of London, we've made progress across almost every borough at a variety of levels. Some councils are just getting on board, taking on the initial stages of our support and planning further engagement, whilst others have already undertaken training, revisited policies, even publicly re-signed the Armed Forces Covenant to reignite the focus on the Armed Forces community, which we've helped to facilitate. We've also seen a huge increase in the number of local authorities signing up to the Defence Employer Recognition Scheme, which you'll hear about shortly after I finish. So, with all that said, and all the support and information that's on offer, what are we looking at as next step for the local authorities? Well, these are the main areas, and clearly they don't have to be targeted in this order, but we would encourage all of them to provide a full and rounded focus on the commitments that were undertaken by signing the Armed Forces Covenant initially. So we would encourage establishing a partnership board or a stakeholder engagement meeting, a 6 or 12 monthly meeting chaired by the council, meeting with military units, local service providers to develop a borough action plan to give strategic direction on how to deliver their commitment to the Armed Forces community and to the Covenant. looking at putting in place policy changes, training, other support. The employer recognition scheme, I've mentioned it a few times already and you'll hear more about it shortly, but clearly councils are employers as well as service providers, and this is a public recognition of what you already do. Appoint an Armed Forces champion. There are a huge amount of Armed Forces champions in the room right now, so most councils have already acknowledged this need, but we want to ensure this role is embedded fully in the council and HR systems, make sure that they're provided with relevant terms of reference as a guidance to the role as a single point of contact, but also for them to encourage the training of personnel in key departments that we've already mentioned to support the need in those areas. We want these people to champion the armed forces as a single point of contact, but with the support of a wider council so that they don't become a single point of failure if they're not available or they do change roles. Develop a website, as I've mentioned, that may relieve the burden on the contact centre and provide useful information and support on a dedicated web page. We want you to train staff. We want you to ensure that all your staff remain up to date with an understanding of the Armed Forces community, the Armed Forces Covenant, and any issues that may be faced. We can provide that face-to-face training at the right level, and we can also provide e-learning, spreading that message throughout the organisation and potentially included in new joiner packages. We're open to taking on new councils, and I'll reiterate that this CPD accredited training is completely free of charge, so get in touch with me to look into arranging this for your teams. We also want to encourage staff to ask the question, how do you know that people aren't being disadvantaged by their service if you haven't asked them if they've served? Changes will be made in the next census to get a wider picture of who and where the military community are, which will help in the long term, but until then, the Armed Forces community may not always make it known that they are in the Armed Forces community. We need to ask that question, have you ever served? And finally, we want to potentially arrange a re-signing. Again, we can facilitate this for any local authorities that are looking to publicly reaffirm their commitment and kickstart the support and awareness within the council. For any of the support that we offer or anything that I've mentioned today, please get in touch directly. All our contact details are in your conference pack, or speak to one of the team whilst we're around today. I'm based out of HQ London District. But that concludes everything that I wanted to cover in the support we offer. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll now hand you straight over to Drew Jaycock from the Reserve Forces and Cadets Association, who will tell you a little bit more about the employer recognition scheme that I've mentioned. Thank you very much.